But he said one. He said we need to. Trump is doing $1 million in tax cuts to the 1%, and
1 million? I thought it was 1 trillion.
that's what. Yeah, sorry, my bad. I got that wrong. 1 trillion is what he said. One
One
trillion.
million dollars in tax cuts to the ultra rich.
Ooh, yay! I
He's
can.
just totally delusional. He's stuck in like, 1960s brain where like $1 million is a ton of money.
What was it? It was Austin Powers. one
Yeah,
million
one
dollars.
million dollars,
That's
a
like
million. I
nothing
don't
in
know how they
today's
like this.
money.
Yeah, that's like what? That's like your upper 10% of American nerds. Like I don't.
Yeah. So the People's State of the Union, Democrats, essentially, they said he's doing tax cut for millionaires. Electric bills up. Well, no, we'll get to that in a different time. Uh, 20% fewer early career research centers, and then $1 trillion in tax cuts to the 1%. That's what they're stating. And then Trump's State of the Union address, he states that tax cuts are good, prices are down. He's going to try to get tariffs to replace the income tax, which, okay, I like it, but I don't think he's going to be able to do it. Well, I like getting rid of the income tax. I'll clarify that. Um, and then lower interest rates will fall for the housing crisis. And he made a lot of stuff when it comes to like cutting taxes and stuff like that. So when it comes to tax cuts, um, tax cuts are just like interest rates essentially. Tax cuts can have a variety of effects depending upon the time, when, and how much is being affected.
Mhm.
Um, let's see. Let me look at my notes. Just as a business can sometimes increase total profits by charging a lower price per unit, a government may collect more total revenue at a lower tax rate. Higher taxes can curb incentives to earn income. That's just what my note says.
It's the
Uh,
Laffer curve.
yeah, is that what that's called? I forgot. I forgot what it was. Is it the Laffer
Yes,
curve? Oh
it's
yeah,
the
where it's
Laffer curve. The idea that
like
there's a ideal tax
peak.
rate.
Yeah, like a peak price essentially.
Yeah,
Okay, so there's that. Whether you believe it or not, I'm back and forth. Let's see some other things I brought up.
I believe the Laffer curve. My only issue with the Laffer curve is it's always an excuse to lower taxes. Where it's like, what if we're below that? What if the reason we're not seeing the returns we want is because we're actually below that? Because I'm not. Here's a black pill uh,
Okay, how black
on
pill are we
me.
talking
All right,
about?
I actually deeply. Okay,
Okay.
I like taxes. Okay, I actually. This is not a joke. This is not a meme. I like taxes. I like when my government functions because I like having a government that can help businesses become world leaders. Okay, we didn't invent nuclear power through the influence of the free market. I
Mm-hmm.
think the government is a great tool for breaking ground on difficult stuff. And I think it's also a great way to make sure that people feel confident enough to build. One, I think it sets a great foundation for a society. I think building a society, using the government to build a society, to build a framework, a groundwork, a stable position to build businesses off of is great. And taxes, I think, are great for that because government needs money to do that. And on top of that, I think it's important that businesses feel safe getting big and taking risks, not because they know the government is necessarily going to bail them out, but because the people who are in them know that even if the business fails, they're going to be okay and that they can try again. The people, not the business, just so we're clear on that. And on top of that, again, I think it's great at breaking new ground. So, yeah, I'm actually the huge black pill for all you listeners. I like taxes. Pay your taxes because guess what? I want you to build a business and I want you to feel confident that even if this business fails, I want you to be willing to take crazy risks because you know that you can only fall so low. All right, that's my position. And also, I want you to have access to a high quality society that gives you high quality people. I think I'm a big Keynesian. All right, I think the government and the market aren't enemies. I think they're allies that are working towards similar goals. I don't think they're directly aligned, but I don't think the lines are pointing in opposite directions either. Okay, so yeah, huge black pill. I'm a big tax advocate. I know, horrible.
No, I'm trying to think. You said you
I'm a
want higher
Wookiee.
taxes. Wouldn't that be
So
bad
when
for
I was talking about the
businesses?
Laffer curve, it depends. It depends on what specific. So this obviously we're talking perfect world here. We're talking a functioning government and function businesses that like actually do well and provide valuable services.
Fair. Yeah.
But when people talk about the Laffer curve, okay, um, on both sides of the Laffer curve, you are getting suboptimal results, both from businesses and from the government. If you're taxing too low, there's not a like this can be seen in a lot of places. Like if the taxes are too low, you can't build right. There aren't good enough roads to transport trucks on, right? Businesses suffer. Things are harder because there isn't enough money moving through the system to actually build sort of the fundaments of what you need for everyone to succeed, right? So that's the left hand side of the Laffer curve when taxes are too low. When taxes are too high, then no one wants to take risks. No one wants to try to build wealth. Um, no one wants to like try to succeed or anything, or they're going to try to find loopholes and ways around it. So you're going to create this like bifurcated society where I mean, you're going to create a bifurcated society anyway, where wealthy people, they don't want in the low tax situation, it's easier for them to like sort of amass wealth and not get back to the community. And you could say, well, in a perfect world, blah 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 blah. But we're saying like to sort of compensate for the lack of a perfect world, which is what the Laffer curve attempts to do, is go, okay, there is actually a peak tax rate at which the returns match, like businesses feel confident taking risks and trying to build interesting things that like help people, or like create products and whatnot, and they can do it in a world that is well funded enough to help support that, right? Roads that work, um, business like copyright law, the enforcement of copyright law requires a well-funded government. You need to pay the judges. You need to pay like the lawyers and whatnot. Like, um, like, and I'm not totally like I think most people are generally for like having a public option for a lot of things, right? I'm all for having private options when it comes to schools, when it comes to insurance, when it comes to whatever. But I also think people agree that there should be a public option. I don't think anyone's like super like bearish on like the idea of a public school, right? So when you have a society that can produce high quality workers, that can make it to where the cost of doing business is lower, that requires some amount of tax revenue, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And when people bring up the Laffer curve, what it always every time they do, it's always to lower taxes, and it's been like that since Laffer came up with it. Um, and it's like the closer and closer we move to zero, if things aren't getting better, it really feels like, hey, can we? Maybe the answer is in the other direction. Maybe if businesses were forced to like reinvest into communities via the government, if they aren't going to do it of their own accord, which I think do, and a lot of them don't, then, and assuming that the government does ensure that these reach the benefiting the community, right? We even this can be even as small as like municipal governments, right? This doesn't have to be the federal government because businesses can be small, um, and if that kind of reinvestment isn't happening naturally through the business, and honestly, I think everyone can agree with this. I think there are some functions. This is the monopoly thing, right? Where some functions are actually better served by a single firm, right? Um, like power, water, internet seem to be better by and large. Just ask Texas when it comes to like cold winters, served by a single entity that's more regulated by the government. Because I'm sure you've seen how monopolies work, right? You've got the single thing, and reaching everyone is actually slightly less cost efficient than maximum profit, right? A
Mm-hmm.
maximum profit from monopoly is actually beneath, or doesn't actually cover everyone who could, reasonably need the service. So with power and water, the government comes and goes, hey, listen, all right, everyone's going to chip in a little bit, and we're going to regulate you and sort of refund you a little to make sure everyone gets access, right? Because I think people deserve water. I don't think that's a controversial opinion. Um, and I think as a society, we've kind of all at least been in the position or agreed tacitly through our voting and our dollars that like, you know what? I'm okay with a monopoly on the water company. I'm okay with a monopoly on the electric company. I'm okay with a monopoly on AT&T, right?
I was gonna say, yeah, you brought up
And I
AT&T
think the
before in the
government sort of
past,
serves that. Yeah,
like with their
and I
towers
think the
you're talking
government kind of
about,
serves a
right?
similar role. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they own all the towers.
Yeah. Okay. Continue. Sorry.
Um, when it comes to like, and I think the government serves a similar role when it comes to like copyright enforcement. They'll have like a particular bureau, or the government will serve a similar role when it comes to road maintenance, right? Cities will do that. So I think most people would agree that like this is probably at least a model that has been functional in the past and could probably be functional again. Um, so when people reference the Laffer curve, it always feels like just an excuse. I don't want to say a partisan excuse, but like a very pro laissez-faire, which I know you and I are not particularly huge fans of, excuse to just be like, yeah, but I own a business and I want to make more money. I want my salary. It's like, yeah. But you've actually, I feel like in some instances, we've actually gone past the optimal tax rate on the Laffer curve. Like I've never seen anyone cite the Laffer curve to go, hey, according to the Laffer curve, we should raise taxes, because that's an equally legitimate position to come to if you look at the Laffer curve, right?
Not for
If
politicians, but
let's say
yeah.
peak corp, yeah, well,
Yeah.
like for if you're just a pure statistician, right? And let's
Yeah.
say you're a divine statistician, you can see actually 25% tax rate, corporate tax rate, is actually the peak tax rate. That's what is actually the most effective. The stink bug just flew in my face, and I'm going to kill it. Um,
Oh, don't kill it. Don't
and
want
you
to
know
make your
this,
room
right?
smell.
Objectively. Yeah, I know. I was expressing hate.
Okay, sorry, continue.
Um, which makes them worse. They're horrible. You want to kill them and you can't. It's evil. It's like the most anti-masculine bug of all time. It teaches you violence isn't the answer. It's very Buddha and Zen. Um, it's the Jesus bug. Um, but like the you're a divine statistician, economist, and you know for a fact 25% is the perfect corporate tax rate for like C corps in this particular example. Um, and then you see a politician or business, lobbyist say, well, we think that a 15% corporate tax rate would be better for our business. And we think that blah, 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 blah. In a reasonable world, now you might see another one. Say you might see like maybe a socialist advocate or representative. Actually, we think the optimal tax rate is 50% on corporate taxes. And so you could look at that person like the laugher. Hey, you're wrong, and actually we need to lower it, because at that price point, they're too scared to build wealth, to like try to take risks, because the cost of doing so just gets too costly, right? They can't actually function a business at that amount of tax rate. And then
Hmm.
you could also turn around theoretically using just the data and look at the person advocating for 15% or 10% or like zero or whatever, and go, actually you're also wrong, because when you do that, society takes a hit so large that you don't have skilled enough workers to work this business. Or in like 10 years, if you do this, you won't produce another crop of functional employees. You won't be able to get your trucks to work because, uh, or you won't be able to like drive on the roads because they'll be in disrepair, which will cost you more on like the buying vehicles more often. You'll lose more products. Crime will go up because we're not maintaining a police force, which is probably should be funded by the government. Your building will burn down, and it'll be harder to prevent that because we don't have well-funded environment. Like you're incurring so much more risk by not paying this 25% taxes.
Hmm.
But my issue is like in a perfect world, you could argue both sides, right? There's a reasonable, if you knew what the actual one was, there's a reasonable argument to make to actually increase taxes using the lab. And it feels like no one ever makes that argument. Everyone who cites the Laffer curve goes, actually, the taxes are too high. And I would be very impressed if anyone came in like a serious political manner and went, I'm going to cite the Laffer curve. We need to raise taxes on businesses. Not having a high enough tax, they're not giving, they're, in a perfect world, they might choose to give back to the community in the more technically effective way. But if they're not going to do that, then we just raise taxes as like maybe a city or as like a state, and go, actually we want higher. And the issue with doing it as a city or state is they flee, right? This is the issue with like tax
Yeah.
havens.
Hmm.
And actually, this is the problem. This is actually directly. This is a perfect example of the Laffer curve. Tax havens are literally the Laffer curve shown like explicitly as a reason to increase taxes. When you have a tax haven, think like what is it?
New Jersey.
Delaware
Oh yeah, Delaware.
is used to be a tax haven, and they're yeah, and they're passing a law to change that. Or like Ireland, when you have these tax havens where businesses can incorporate there and not get charged X amount in tax, their incentive to reinvest into the communities goes away, right? So now, do you think Delaware is seeing any serious returns for having like Amazon incorporated there? No. So why would you, like, if you're a Delawarean, this is actually bad for you to have no corporate tax, because you're not seeing any benefits of maybe some of the largest corporations ever to exist. You're not even seeing like 1% of their income. That would, like,
Hmm.
1% of Amazon's income would change the state. Like that would, it would turn it into like a utopia, okay?
Hmm.
Like this is like one of those things where it's like it's actually tax havens are both bad for the people in the tax havens, unless you do like underhanded dealings. It's the only people at the top really see big benefits, because that's how they get in, right? This is the Ireland. Saw a bunch of like Irish politicians get really wealthy off of it because the businesses would basically pay them to keep it a tax haven and offer them like lucrative positions after they retired. Like, oh, you can come work on our board of directors or a board of directors of this smaller corporation that we own that definitely does stuff and isn't just like a hush money campaign. Um, and it's bad for the company that isn't the tax haven because now you can't collect on a company that could reasonably be doing like sure, you're right. Amazon I do think provides a lot of benefits, but they're not maintaining the roads they're adding wear to.
Oh, fair,
So
yeah.
like even through like a utilitarian calculus, having all these unless they're going to start building train tracks, which hey, you know what? If Amazon wants to start building a rail network, I am on board. But Amazon isn't incentivized to build a rail network because it costs them nothing. The taxpayers foot the bill for their wear and tear on the roads without Amazon having to like recontribute any money. And obviously this is like an issue where it's like you could find tax loopholes in other ways. But like tax havens are bad for both the people in the tax haven because they're not seeing any money from it. Only like the elites in the area are who made it a tax haven, the political elites. And
Mm-hmm.
then in the domestic market, who isn't affected by who doesn't get to get the tax revenue because you're not actually a corporation incorporated here, so you don't actually have to pay here. Well, now you're footing the bill for all the wear they're putting on your for all the money they're costing your police department, they're costing your legal, like your state and local government, all the money that they're costing for your roads and for all this other stuff, and they're taking talent from your schools, which you want your kids to get jobs, right? They're taking talent from your schools, but they're not reinvesting in building more talent, right? You're being effectively asked to fund these businesses, and
Yeah.
actually, this is why there's been a huge global push to remove global tax havens. Um, which is why Ireland, I think, recently started instituting corporate taxes. That's why Delaware has, because these countries are realizing, hey, we're not, you're burning through our roads and you're not paying for that at all. Like, this is a public service that it's unironically, it's literally the tragedy of the commons. When you have no incentive to not just take, you're just going to take. Um,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a tragedy of communism. I might be misciting that, but you get the idea. Um,
I got you. I got you.
I
Yeah.
think the Laffer curve isn't actually that stupid of an economic idea, but part of me always goes, but are we continuing to move in the wrong direction because corporate interest aligns that, right? Corporations want to not be taxed, just like you don't want to be taxed, like in like a very strict like personal. If the
Yeah.
point of a corporation is to return shareholder value, then would that not involve lobbying the government to using whatever economic devices available to them to cajole the lawmakers into giving them what they want, including citing things like the paying off politicians and going, the Laffer curve says there's an optimal tax point, and we think we're past that. We think it's too high. We just want to lower it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's my whole
okay.
diatribe on the Laffer.
And on that point, you just brought up with the whole lobbying thing. I do have a note here. It says that now, granted, this is one source, and I trust the source, but it's just one source, and it's
Oh, is
that
it the Citizens United?
no. No. My sources come from like books, like this one. This book is called the. I believe it's from this book. It's called the Myth of Capitalism. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
no, it's not like communist stuff. It's basically talking about oligarchies and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. Like how like there's like four chicken companies in the United States, and they'll buy up smaller chicken companies, stuff like that. And then
Yep,
like
that's what Google does.
they'll run like a cartel kind of thing, like, oh, if I
Mm-hmm.
won't decrease my prices if you don't, you know what I mean? That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
In that book, it's more competition will lower your prices, but so it's not like pro communism crap. But I do have a note here, and it says that because you talk about lobbying, is that
Mm-hmm.
for every dollar a firm spent lobbying for tax breaks, they receive about $220 in return for every dollar they spend
Mm-hmm.
for tax breaks. So I thought
In
that
reference to what you just said, I sent you a graph.
oh
So if billionaires function as basically emissaries for corporations, um, if we assume that, then man, if your calculus is right, every $1 spent on lobbying for for tax breaks nets them $200. And
mm-hmm
then Citizens United said corporations can basically vomit as much money as they want into the political system.
yeah
Is that not like the perfect evidence of like the moving in the right direction?
yeah, and that's just right
At
after
least that's what it feels like
the
to me.
2010 crash, which we talk about a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, that's interesting. Now I do want to get into one more thing about ask you one more
Yep.
thing because earlier you said you're a big Keynesian fan. I'm
Yeah.
wishy washy, but so what are your thoughts on supply side economics? Because on the books I've read, they don't match together. For example, my note says here, supply side economics argues that reducing tax rates stimulates investment and production. Now, I do have pros and cons. So, for example, the Kennedy Johnson tax cut of 1964. Now, it says here that after the cut, the GDP went from 4.1% in 1963 to 8.5% in 1965. I don't know if that's correlation or causation, but it is, numbers to note. Now, that being said, the Reagan, Bush, and Trump tax cuts are usually cited a lot for having expanded the national debt. Now,
Mhm.
also that being said, there are some sources argue that tax cuts for the top 10% don't really have evidence that show that that there's any growth in employment or income. However, tax cuts for the bottom 90% do have some kind of like positive outcome sometimes. So again, I know you said you're a big Keynesian, and again, based
Mhm.
on the stuff I read, supply side economics is not Keynesian. Thoughts?
Um, yeah. So when it comes to, here's the thing with GDP. I think GDP is broadly a good metric for determining how healthy an economy. Um, I think it has its particular downfalls, like whenever like Nvidia starts doing absurdly, like our GDP went up a crazy amount when Nvidia started doing well. It's like that's speculative. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think GDP does rely a little bit on speculative stuff, but I still think ultimately it's a good measure. I think it can be true that it's not a perfect measure, but is a good measure. Um, supply side economics. Give me your strict definition of that, like the one you're working, because I hear it thrown around a lot, and I hear a lot of stuff on it. And to be completely frank, I am not familiar with the like official definition of supply side economics.
All right. So supply side
Because
economics. I
that
mean,
sounds like because supply side economics sounds like um, the way you described it is if we give tax cuts to corporations, like parentheses the suppliers, then the economy will do better at large. Is that?
okay. Okay. So I have the definition here. Well, I have the definition. I asked Grok. Supply side economics is a macroeconomic
I'll
theory
trust
that,
Grok.
huh? You trust Grok? Okay. Okay.
I'll
Fair.
trust Grok.
Okay, that's fair. That emphasizes
I trust him with
boosting
my life.
economic growth primarily by increasing the supply, production of goods and services in the economy, rather than focusing on stimulating demand in parentheses as in Keynesian economics, unquote. Not
Okay.
unquote,
Yeah, yeah. All
close
right.
parentheses.
Um, my, I don't know. I stimulating demand is always it's touchy, but I think it's effective in probably 60 some odd percent of cases. I think if the most important thing you if I think if you consider the most important thing to be keeping an economy rolling, right? You
Mm-hmm.
never want to stop the wheel. I think probably stimulation works better than supply side stuff because like if you're trying to be like, okay, I want the economy to keep rolling, I want people to keep spending money, um, then giving people more opportunities to spend that money, even if the money is worth less than it was previously, think like inflation, um, then I think that's probably a more effective trade. Now, will it work ad nauseum forever? I have no idea. Um, but I don't know. Supply side economics with that particular definition,
Yeah, I get that. I
I
get that. I'm just
probably not.
wondering.
I think I probably support Keynes stuff over that. I would need to read up like on more specifics. My general economic position, to sort of shift gears a tiny bit, is I think maybe not necessarily workers, but like citizens are probably the most important part of the economy. I'm a big fan of the American middle class, um, because they're our big tax engine, and the fact that they're going away is actually a huge problem for the United States,
Mm-hmm.
um, because they're the ones who spend the most amount of money. Which I'm a big like, if you can keep the beast rolling, you're probably in a good position. And the nice thing about the American middle class sort of consumerist citizen market is that if they're making decent enough money to be happy, then they're spending lots of that money. Um, if we can find a way to ensure that that particular engine of both tax and economic revenue, so for both businesses and the government, works, um, because my opinion is economics broadly is about throughput. Um, and if you have a strong throughput, like the middle class is like if you look in the past, like the middle class is phenomenal at throughput. Money moves so fast in the middle class.
Mm-hmm.
Money actually doesn't move that fast between ultra wealthy people, which is the whole strategy of ultra wealthy people. Is you keep the money invested in the market, it's not really moving. Um, so it builds interest and interest, and then you take out a loan on that, and you'll do like sort of these big dump investments here and there. But they're a bit harder to generate tax revenue on, and a lot of it is very speculative, so there's no immediate corporate revenue. Like this is good for like long-term, like potentially future stuff. Like I'm not anti-business, I'm not anti-rich person per se, um, and but that's not good for like that's like a good long-term solution. But I think for short and medium term, I think the middle class is the heart and soul of the U.S. economy, and I think partially they're at odds with both extreme taxation and extreme anti-taxation, um, because your standard person probably can't foot. This is why businesses are great because your standard person. This is why business and government are great. Your standard person can't foot the bill to educate their child, um, or every single middle class person probably can't foot the bill to educate their child all the way through college. They could probably foot the bill for college or foot the bill for like K through 12, but they probably can't foot the bill for both in like a normal economic situation. Or actually, they probably could if college prices weren't totally screwed up. Um,
Yeah.
but like looking at this this way, like they do have a limit to their possible spending. They like to do lots of little purchases, which is what keeps the economy. If we can keep them in position to do that, highly taxing those little purchases with like sales tax, or taxing their general ability to keep that money machine moving with like exorbitant income taxes are probably pretty harmful. So you don't want a income tax that soars super high. Um, which even that I'm a little trepidatious on. I've seen some stuff talking about like if you have really high income taxes, it encourages people to business. Um, which if you keep the money in the business as opposed to making it a personal income, you're more likely to invest it in long-term stuff. Think like we had like a 90% tax rate in like the 50s and 60s and 70s or something. I think it was all the way up until the early 80s. We were doing when we had a lot of like economic growth post-war. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
I saw sort of a loose theory that was like having these higher taxes on personal incomes encouraged people to keep the money within the business because actually your individual person can't effectively spend that. There's a upper bound which is around probably 100 grand now in 2026 money. It was like 80 grand a couple of years ago of like the most amount of money you can spend and still be a net benefit economically without actually like literally like people see this problem like, literally too much money to spend. Like you need to start buying like absurd things like yachts and private jets, and even then
To retain value.
big
Yeah.
one-time purchases like that don't continuously generate revenue for either
Mm-hmm.
the government or the business. It's actually really unhealthy for society to have. It's I want people to be wealthy. I don't mind billionaires conceptually, but I kind of prefer the model of billionaire where it's like your wealth is in your company, and you probably shouldn't be able to leverage that for personal growth beyond a certain point, because that feels I don't know that just feels bad. That's an I feel statement. That's not a direct like, economic belief. Um, but yeah, if you have like these ultra rich people doing these big one-time purchases, that's actually not great for the economy. I would rather that money invested into R&D, into uh, uh, like research. I already said research and development, like R&D or um, new ventures or like venture capital and stuff. I think when money is sort of allowed to like sit in accounts, it's probably not healthy for the economy, which is why I think sort of demand incentives work better because it gets me what I want, which is money moving through the system.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, I believe that throughput is what builds both a healthy taxation thing, 'cause again, I'm pro tax, and a healthy economic sector. Businesses like it when people are spending money because the businesses are the ones where the money is getting spent. Um, and if you destroy most people's ability to get money, whether through taxation that is too low, so the businesses, um, one, you can't have a well-funded business, well-funded schools and hospitals and other services that we all sort of collectively agree the government should handle, like fire departments. Those get poorly funded, and I mean, let's be honest. Businesses are made of people who aren't immune to like trying to hoard money or whatever. And if the tax is too high, well, then no one wants
Yeah.
to build revenue because if the government's taking 99% of it. But I do think there's like a level of like if you build sort of demand into. So to answer your question, I'm against supply side economics. I think throughput is important, and I think if you can manage taxation and economic incentives in a way to build a healthy middle class that constitutes probably 70 to 80% of the American population, living lives with the American dream, cars, the blah 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 blah. If you don't have corporations who see their job as like to generate as much shareholder value for the Epstein class as they possibly can, and you don't have a tax plan whose whole job is to siphon as much money from, or siphon as much money from the taxpayer as humanly possible. I think there's a healthy middle ground, and frankly, I think probably for personal taxes it might be is a little uh, lower than it is. I think for corporate taxes, it's probably a good bit higher than we're currently at, as like a personal belief. But
Hmm.
throughput is what matters. Optimizing throughput, and also here's the best part: you don't need to optimize throughput through specifically tax, right? This is we're sort of like trying to hammer a nail with a screwdriver here. You can do it through like policy. And just making it inconvenient to do the wrong thing. I'm a very big believer in make the good thing easy and the bad thing hard.
Hmm.
You can enact like policy plans that make it in like that incentive. This is why demand stuff works, right? Good things, making good things easy and bad things hard is like make doing something good costly or cost beneficial to a company. Hey, if you invest in, green energy or, you know, building like jobs in the local community or like community cleanup programs, if you invest in these things that make the local area better or the places that you're extracting talent and resources from better, then like you get a tax break or you get like a subsidy for XYZ versus just like a raw tax break for no reason. I think you'll probably end up in a net better position. Um, but yeah, so yeah, to answer your question, I think the demand stimulation is probably better. I think most people, in most economic situations, respond better to carrots than to sticks.
Okay, I got you. I got you. Again, the books I've read not very Keynesian friendly. So, but you'll have to explain it to me.
Interesting.
For sure, for sure. I mean, I'm willing to learn. Just haven't got to those books yet. But so again, you're obviously pro tax for businesses. So, but wouldn't higher taxes de-incentivize people from starting businesses?
Past a certain point. I mean, it's like, I mean, I'll acquiesce that I think there's a good idea behind that there is an optimal taxation point.
Yeah, fair, fair.
Um,
Hmm.
but if you're so this is sort of like the position that I want people. This is what the mindset that I want a business owner to have, or just your average taxpayer. You need to not look at taxes, and this is a fault of both the government and corporations. Like, see Citizens United, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but in a way, this is a part of a fault of the government. If you inefficiently distribute your taxes, people aren't going to want to pay them. Which is why I think there should be like some level of like, people talk about like, the government should give you an itemized list of what all taxes are. I'm actually not against that. I think it's probably a pretty good idea because what it does is incentivize the government to put money towards things that people care about.
Hmm.
You know what? I do think researching uh, the sexual behaviors of rats on cocaine. You know what? Maybe it's a little ridiculous, but if you had like some sort of explanation, I could maybe get behind it. It's like, oh, we're maybe thinking about releasing cocaine to the public, in which case I'm so behind it. Um, but if it's like I think this is a stewardship problem, right? People should see themselves in America because we're a democracy. You should see yourself as a cooperative steward of the health of your local region and your country. So if you're a business owner, you shouldn't be looking at your business as just as right. This is why I have an issue with like it's called a shareholder capitalism. It's like the only purpose of a business. This was Ford versus Dodge, I believe, in 1940 something, or maybe 1960. But there's a big Supreme Court case that basically decided that built the economic model we have now.
Yeah.
Businesses are only culpable to their shareholders.
Yep.
And that's your only job. Because I think Dodge sued Ford over, or Ford sued Dodge over this one way or the other, because they thought that pursuing only the revenue of a shareholder was bad and illegal. Like you shouldn't be allowed to only to destroy the quality of a product um, to maximize profit, right? Think enshittification, think shrinkflation, right? Making a product smaller and charging the same amount of price for it. They thought that stuff should be illegal, and they ended up losing that case. And it was decided that the business's only obligation is to
Shareholders.
the shareholder. I think this is a pretty unfortunate model because I think it to use sort of like harsh language. I think it's kind of childish, right? It's me want to make me most amount of money. It's like
Mm-hmm.
really what we should be pursuing. Not even I love capitalism. I think it's great. I think it's the most efficient economic model ever devised, and I think it best fulfills like sort of the classical liberal principles of pursuit of independence and liberty. I think that capitalism is the best at achieving this, but I also think liberal democracies, think United States, are the best at also ensuring that the rights of their people are not violated by excessive greed in this economic. And I also think that the capitalism does a good job, um, sort of counterbalancing the government's desire for like total control. Right? I think if you read Francis Fukuyama's The End of History and the Last Man, he talks about sort of like economics, liberalism and capitalism kind of being at odds. Um, but they make sort of like this nice binary system. I think a couple years ago, Jordan Peterson had this very like insightful thing. Binary systems are some of the most effective systems. Sort of push that like dual when they push against each other, it's actually more efficient than just one thing moving on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think, ironically, the competition between the government, because the government and companies shouldn't be colluding with one another to screw over the person. They should be competing for the person's attention, right? They should be competing. The government should be trying to outcompete the market and providing high quality, maybe not goods and services, but providing out like a high quality like thing, right? The public option. And I think corporations should be also sort of in the same boat. So since the Dodge versus Ford, corporations only have incentive to build to ensure shareholder value. I think what that does is it changes people's perspective to a me want to make most money me can. Fuck you. It's like, well,
Yeah.
hold on. We have to get along here. This is like we have everyone has to not in a communist way, but it's healthier for the market if we don't view ourselves as someone trying to steal my money and scam me, but more of like because it encourages in my head almost like a zero sum model, right? If I am winning, someone else must be losing. It's like no, 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 no. The best part of capitalism is that everyone wins. Everyone wins.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fundamental belief of the system that you value those dollars more than you value that rock, and I value that rock more than I value these. We both walk away from this better than we walked in, right? It's a positive sum game. And when you change it to actually your only obligation is to specifically yourself, I think it partially encourages this mentality of me first, and I'm getting screwed if I'm not winning. Um,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm getting screwed if someone else um, isn't doing something that directly benefits me. But if you switch to more like what I call like a steward mindset, where you go, I want more than just to succeed selfishly. I want to live in a society where everyone can succeed like me. Right? This was the American dream. I want to live in a society where everyone can succeed like me. And when it comes to taxing corporations and incentivizing them, or taxing corporations or incentivizing them to do specific things, I want the mentality of every business owner when it comes to paying taxes to be, and this is a government stewardship issue as well. I am paying this tax because it makes my business better and easier to run, right? I don't have to worry about someone breaking in because the police, I don't have to hire private security because the police are competent and well trained and well funded. I don't have to worry about my building burning down because the police are, or because the firemen are competent and well trained and well funded. I don't have to worry about my having to buy new trucks every day for deliveries because the roads are well paved and well funded. I don't have to worry about, training up employees from nothing, like right corporate like coal mining towns. I don't have to worry about people who might cause problems to my businesses, right? I don't have to worry about crime. I don't have to worry about fires. I don't have to worry about low quality employees. I can get high quality employees because they have a public option, right? I can send my kids to a great school. They can walk in, good neighborhoods. I don't have to worry about my kids potentially like, getting hurt or attacked by criminals because that's where my tax dollars are going, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I, as a business, I want to support a government that does that, right? Whether it's a state government, local government, federal government, right? I like a federal government that protects my copyright. I invented something cool, and I deserve to profit, right? So copyrights are like almost very Keynesian, right? It's a market protection in like a true perfect laissez-faire market. Who cares about copyrights, bro? If you're gonna
Yeah.
make it better than the next guy. But
Mm-hmm.
copyrights, there's a little bit of sense to it. It's like, hey, I made this thing.
Yeah.
I deserve to get a little something something off of it without some guy who happens to have been rich before I was seeing the idea, right? It's the cotton gin, right? Where some guy sees the idea, doesn't get it patented fast enough. Boom, some bigger, richer person comes out, produces a billion of them at way lower cost because he can do the Amazon and like way undercut the market. Um, like I like that. I like because that's encourages people to invent things, right? Copyrights encourage people to invent things.
Mm-hmm.
Now they also encourage some bad behavior, like like copyright spamming, where you just copyright a billion things,
Bunch of
right?
stuff. Yeah.
Um, but protections like this incentivize people to take risks, right? It
Mm-hmm.
is some level of like, if you're a business, you're like, I'm investing in my copyright protection. I'm investing when I pay my taxes. It's more efficient for me to pay these taxes than to pay other private corporations to do these things because it's better if I chip in a little bit here and reap the benefits of everybody chipping in a little bit. And it's same is true for for persons paying taxes, right? Hey, you're a person. You got to get this job because that business can afford to be here because they don't have to hire private security, because they don't have to pay for roads, because they don't have to do all this other stuff. You can afford to, you don't have to, you know, instead of paying $1 million out of pocket to send your kid to school, you pay a total of like, let's say like 40 grand throughout your entire child's entire life because you're able to send them to a public school with a high quality education because teachers are paid well, because you pay X amount of taxes. You're right. It's not, again, this is an issue with the government. Right? This is a government stewardship problem. But that's sort of the society that I would want to live in. One where it's like you can build big businesses and you can get wealthy and you can reap the reward like hard work and whatever. And maybe I don't want to say the word meritocracy because that has implications. But like I want businesses to feel confident in that, yeah, it's worth my money to invest in this stuff. I don't want to have to pave my own roads. I don't want to have to hire my own security. And if you're a person, you don't want to have to hire your own security to guard your home. You don't want to have to, you know, run out with the garden hose to try to put out your house fire. That's what I think. When people think of taxes, you should think of it as collective stewardship of a better society.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I got you. I
that's
got you.
my position. That's why I'm pro-tax because to me it's stewardship. And again, this is a government problem. If the government can't follow through on the stewardship, what we should be doing, even though we have a lot of apathy, because hot take, personal opinion, fucking voters are the problem with the country. It's like it's easy to hate the rich. Do you have the courage to hate the poor? It's easy to hate the government. Do you have the courage to hate the voter? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think the voters are a big part of the problem. Russian info psyops notwithstanding, and potential Jeffrey Epstein psyops notwithstanding, um, I think voters should be more. This is why I'm a big civics person. Voters should be more engaged. The government is the steward, right? We all That's what the government's job is to govern, is to steward the land to make sure that everyone's playing nice, everyone's happy. And if they're not doing a good job at that, get rid of the people who are there.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. So
but yeah, that's that's
I'm
that's
gonna be.
why I'm pro tax because to
I
me it's stewardship.
I got you. So I got two things to pick your brain at, because
Go for it.
this is the pick your brain show. Okay. So you're pro tax. We get that.
Yeah.
So, but when it comes to the tariffs, you don't like tariffs. But when it comes to, like, from my understanding, the tariffs are paid for
Mhm.
by the importers, not the exporters, and that is a tax. But that is
Yes, but I
something
think it's
that
an
people pay,
inefficient tax.
an inefficient tax. How so?
So you want because it doesn't catch the money where it's moving as effectively. I think I've talked about a little in the past. Tariffs have their place. They can actually be very efficient, like uh, protectionist tools for like vital industries. Think like tech and information. But when it comes to tariffs, I don't know. I think they're ineffective um, because they discourage.
Like
It's really
discourage
about the
trade.
length and width of the thought. I think an income tax or a sales tax is more effective at doing the job a tariff might do and has less negative side effects, or the negative side effects are more broadly distributed in a way that makes people less adverse to them.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Okay.
doing like a blanket tariff on like foreign imports, it's like, listen, if you're a company, right? Let's say you're Honda and you want to sell cars or motorcycles, in the United States, or you want to sell motorcycles. I think putting a tariff on um, Honda on foreign cars. Like, right, okay, we're putting a tariff on foreign motorcycles. We want Harley Davidson to do. That's great. But now Harley Davidson has no natural competition. Remember, pro tax but I'm pro market. All right, these are not conflicting positions. I
Mm-hmm.
want people to have access to the best possible quality products they can. Let's say in this example, Hondas, while cheaper than Harley Davidson's, or they're more affordable, but maybe they're not quite as well made. But there's a natural position in the market for those vehicles. I think it's you will get more money as the government if you go, listen, we'll do a sales tax, right? And ultimately, that will obviously be passed on to the consumer, as all taxes are, as all corporate taxes are.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but corporate taxes are nice because they're a different level of diffusion, right? So taxes, a big part of taxes is diffusement, right? Who gets hit the hardest? You can put a big tax on a corporation because it will diffuse out through their products, and no one gets hit super hard, and the corporation is effectively still giving money back, right? So you're catching one money flow area for people through their incomes and whatnot, or like sales, right? You're catching another part of sort of the flow of money. When you do tariffs, I think tariffs have a lot of potentially very negative externalities, right? So if you're an American company, it makes it harder to import pieces of the stuff you might need, right? If you're Harley Davidson, right, they put a tariff on motorcycles and all motorcycles. Actually, as Harley Davidson, you're looking at the Honda like handlebars, and actually you've maybe been using those. You maybe been using these for a couple of years because I don't know why mic is picking me up when I mumble. You've maybe been using these, and no one really noticed because they were good, right? They fit the product. No one had any problems with it, and it was cheaper and more effective. Well, now you have to go back to that American handlebar. So now your product is more expensive. And also, I like big global integrated market. Sue me, I'm a globalism guy. Um, I like vanilla, okay? And vanilla is a global product. I like Toyota, and Toyota is a global product.
Mm-hmm.
And also, they're built here, right? If we're a good enough economy, like they'll come and they'll bring their stuff here. Um, but yeah, tariffs. I think the negative externalities are too high, and I think the direct costs it poorly diffuses the cost. Because if it's a federal thing, um, also this is another particular thing on taxes, which is I think the biggest tax beneficiaries should be your local government, um, and then your state, and then your your um, your federal government. Because I'm not in favor of like an ultra enormous see everything, control everything federal government. I think having an empowered federal government that can effectively do its job is probably a good thing. And whatever it takes to have an empowered federal government that can effectively do its job, I'm willing to pay. I don't want to pay for a bloated federal government that just wants to, keep shoving money down the throats of Congress people, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
into whatever obscure bureau or whatever. Not that even I'm necessarily ultra anti-bureaucrat because I reckon it's like accountants. Okay, they're just accountants, kind of. But I want them to do an effective job because of American stewardship. But yeah, I don't know. Tariffs, they hit individuals really hard. So if you levy like a 15% tariff or 30% tariff or 10% tariff, that goes directly to the buyer. But then the effects of that, it's the inverse of what you want with taxes. On taxes, you want small inconvenience, widespread benefit, right? But
Yeah.
you don't want the benefit to be too widespread. Um, Otherwise, people won't feel it, right? There's sort of like a sweet spot, um, which is why I think the local to state to federal tax structure is actually the best. Because you should feel the biggest hit on your taxes should yield you the biggest benefit, and that's going to be your most local benefits. Um, with tariffs, it's a very big hit, right, at point of sale, right? So that Honda motorcycle just jumped from, let's say $1,000 with like a with no import to you put like a 10% import. Now it's $1,100. That's a big hit initially, and then the effects of that is that money goes to the federal government.
Okay. Yeah.
You're not really feeling that. That's why I think they're not super effective at doing the particular job that I think taxes should do. Not that they don't generate government revenue, but I think if you wanted to generate federal revenue, there are more effective and efficient ways to do it that generate less. Because managing expectations is part of it. We do live in a world with people, with other stuff. So even beyond just a pure numbers game, um, tariffs are tools that are best used sparingly and in specific situations. I don't think is a blanket thing. And also, it depends on your economy. There are economies in which tariffs are actually very, very, very manufacturing economies, like China was for a long time. Tariffs are actually really efficient because your entire economy relies on the manufacturing sector. And if somewhere else has cheaper labor than you, then you will basically get blown out of the water. But America, part of why we lost our manufacturing economy is because we had workers that were too skilled to work in like manufacturing areas. Not that it should go away entirely. Um, I think there's still a natural place in the market for it, but I think America's large market moved up to um, it's not higher skilled labor, there's a term for it where it's like higher level production, right? Software engineering is higher level than it requires a more specific knowledge set and a little bit more training to get proficient with than working in a factory. Like, I'm not to besmirch factory workers, but ideally, factory work should be easy and boring. Um,
It
because
is.
theoretically, you should have, like, yeah, right? Ideally, it should be easy and boring. Um, and you're there because humans do the job better than whatever robot can currently, right? Um, but then the economy will shift towards higher skilled labor as people get wealthier and they're able to send their kids to like, educational institutions to learn more about stuff. Um, Building a marketing campaign is higher skill labor than working in a factory. Even if it doesn't feel like it's much higher skill, the resources required to do that, or a marketing campaign will generate more revenue for a company long term, or a better
Mm-hmm.
financial department will generate more GDP and wealth for a country long term than a strong like manufacturing department. The manufacturing department is necessary. It's just less um, of the like revenue generating point. I don't know all the specific technicals of why um, it generates more stuff. I like if I read into it, I could probably come up with an answer pretty quickly. But
Mm-hmm. I got you. I got you. Okay. And I got.
you're developing higher quality. It's a higher quality good. Um, Weirdly enough. So when you have an economy that's based off of that kind of production, think movies, think corporations like Apple, which is, yes, a manufacturing company, but they're also a software and they're a hardware company, but they're also a software company. Or you have stuff like Nvidia, or you have Microsoft, who makes a lot of their money off of like the program Windows. Maintaining that company requires a different, higher level skill set than maintaining, Bethlehem Steel, right? Like, it does. Or like a car company generating vehicles. There's a reason Detroit started to go under, and part of that was cars were no longer the most high tech thing on the market. The economy grew past cars when it came to labor skill. It wasn't the entire reason, but it was part of the reason. Um, and yeah. So if you're a manufacturing economy, I think tariffs are actually probably a great way to generate revenue, which is why the United States had it in the because we were in by and large a manufacturing economy. But now that we're no longer a manufacturing economy, we're a high level production economy. Tariffs are probably less effective because we're seeing less direct benefits from them, protecting our manufacturing, and we're seeing more direct negatives from them, paying 30% more on XYZ cheap, maybe not cheap plastic Temu thing, but like any imported item, like an item of clothing, um, watching a shirt, or even there's like food stuffs that like we get from Mexico because it's just more
Coffee
efficient to get
beans
them from
and stuff like that.
Mexico.
Yeah.
Yeah. Watching that jump 30% in price, like, oh, that's a big hit. And then it goes straight to the federal government to like fund more drones or like go to like a tenth, like a billionth of the cost of a single like Hellfire missile. Not that I'm against having a military. Military is important because it supports trade, especially a navy. There's a reason our navy is so strong, like
Mm-hmm.
free trade, and it's good to enforce that. Just like police, police are required for a healthy society.
Mm-hmm.
Law, you have to have laws, and you have to be able to enforce. Um, but That's why I don't think tariffs are effective, because it's a big hit, and we're not really protecting stuff. Again, I think they have a purpose. I think that we should have a lot of tariffs, very strong tariffs on our tech and information sector, because I don't want China in my phone. I don't trust them as much as I don't trust our government, because I think they're like pretry bad stewards, especially with all the Epstein stuff coming out. Oh my God.
For real.
I also don't trust them. I also don't trust. I trust them less. Better the devil, the actual devil that I know, than the whatever weird Chinese devil exists over there. Okay. I don't know what Xi gets up to,
Yeah,
and I don't
I
want
get.
to.
Okay,
Actually, I do want to, because that's good for us.
yeah, it's good for us. Good intel. Okay, well, I got one more thing for you because again,
Sure,
you're,
hit me
you're,
with your best
I
shot.
was like you gotta buy me on this. Well, you gotta convince me on this Keynesian stuff because I haven't got those books yet. So
I'm big tax man.
for real, yeah. So big
Ready.
tax. Do you think we can get to a point where people are too reliant on like the tax subsidies? Now, where I get that from is because earlier in this episode and previous episodes, you
Mm-hmm.
stated that when companies are getting paid via tax, they're gonna take as long as they can until they get to hit to that deadline. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I agree with you because the bridge
Yeah.
near me, it took eight
Mm-hmm.
months just to get it
Mm-hmm.
like fixed up again. Now, and then like 75, it was under construction for like 18 years, 18 22 years, somewhere around there. But we've also stated that high taxes, and you said this could be a downfall,
Mm-hmm.
not a downfall, but like a negative of Keynesians, is that higher taxes decentivizes starting companies. So we have government paying stuff, so things are taking longer, but there's not a competition because no one wants to take that risk of paying high taxes. Business might not make it, so there's no competition to the government. Thoughts?
So let me phrase it back to you to make sure I understand. It sounds like what you're asking me is, um, given that in a lot of instances,
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to government money, because it's guaranteed, um, corporations are incentivized to do, um, once they've been paid, because they know they're going to get paid, they're incentivized to, one, do low quality work, two, do the work slowly, and then three, focus on securing government contracts, potentially over free market contracts, because the money is guaranteed. And then you build companies that have an over reliance taxpayer funding, that aren't generating the proportional amount of value to society that they reasonably should, given that position.
Yes, that's first half of it.
Okay. So
And
I'll answer that, which is, um, I honestly have no idea how you would solve. I mean, okay, I'm sure there's particular policies you could pick up. I know bounties are pretty effective at handling that type of stuff. Tightening time frames. Um, but it kind of feels, and I hate to feel like I'm deflecting here, because I kind of am, where it's like you could make a similar argument about collusion in like a more free market, where it's
mm-hmm.
like, yeah, but if there's less government oversight, if there's less government, and that just incentivize companies to like skirt the law, collude with one another. How do you solve that problem? Well, this is kind of like one of those perpetual issues of like, well, how do you stop companies from, you know, relying too much on the government? I don't. No one knows, man.
It's a
Um,
curve.
it's that's why it's the Laffer curve.
Curve.
Maybe we're not taxing them too much. We'll tax them less. Okay, maybe we're not taxing them enough. We'll tax them more. But when it comes to specifically like reliance on government subsidies,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of that can be solved regarding I in my head, the way it works is sort of like a bicycle, right? Ideally, like your dad is there to help you, and he gives you a little, like he helps you to begin with, and you have the training wheels on, and then you ride around a little bit with the training wheels, then eventually the training wheels come off, because you should be able to handle this competently on your own, and like develop your stuff. Because if he's distracted, right? If money is going, if the training wheels are still on, dad is still trying to help you learn to ride a bike. That means your other siblings are trying to ride a bike. In this example, the government is the dad, and your siblings are other corporations, right? If a lot of money is going towards you, that means money isn't going towards someone else who could be starting a business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think of it sort of like the training wheels version of it, where if we're talking about starting businesses, right? And they become reliant on government subsidies. The subsidies should be to help start a business, not to help you run a business.
Okay.
You should be able to run
Mm-hmm.
a business, be successful. We want you to get into the market, to really build competition, to give our citizens and our consumers the best possible product to outcompete the other guys, right? We're trying to build competition here. But if everyone keeps the training wheels on and everyone has a dad pushing them, now we're in a situation where it's like, okay, are we
We can't
really
even support
competing? Are you
ourselves.
really trying, right? If you can't support yourself, you're you're more of a harm than you are help, right? Dad
Mm-hmm.
can't divide his attention this much and still produce good, like competent, because ultimately there are foreign companies, right? I am talking U.S. politics. There are foreign companies. There are companies in other states if we're talking local. There are companies in other cities or states if we're talking stateside, and there's companies in other state or in other cities if we're talking super local, right?
Yeah.
And if a different city offers a more comprehensive program, other than like keep you and actually that might have the inverse effect. Um, but again, we're sort of back to the Laffer curve position where it's like, yeah, but this is too much government subsidy.
Mm-hmm.
People are actually worse off if the government is this sort of hand-holdy when it comes to building and running business. Um, Deadlines, timetable, similar-ish to not exactly like the P, but sort of that broad idea. I broad very generously, um, because the PPP loans I think were probably very poorly executed on. But that sort of idea of like,
I think
hey,
they're a
we
terrible.
want to give you a
Period.
kickstart. Yeah. All right. I was hedging a little bit because I'm like, I haven't read a ton into them.
Well,
Join you on that position. I think they
okay,
were
so
just bad.
okay, now when we talk about PPP loans, on paper, great idea. Business is
Hmm.
struggling, we'll give you a loan, you pay us back. The problem is people who shouldn't be taking out loans
Yeah.
were taking out
Started.
loans and
Yeah.
not paying them back,
Right. There
and
should have
it.
been better. Right. This is another stewardship problem. There should have been better stewardship of what it meant to have a business. It need a PPP loan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, right. Open a PPP. You open a business. Get a PPP loan. Dissolve the
Like, yeah,
business.
yeah, yeah.
Debt gone.
Open a business, make it an LLC, take out the loan, business collapses because it's an LLC. You, the person, not responsible, but you're still holding the cash.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
so.
Yeah. So like PPP loans bad, but like sort of in that vein of like, and this is true. I think a lot of stuff that's true that can be true of business can also be true of personal stuff. I'm in favor of giving like young families tax credits to buy houses. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because I think it's important for society for young families to have tax. Now, I don't think there should be a perpetual. Well, this might be like so. This we're moving past like raw economics into like society building stuff when it comes to taxation. But I think if we're talking raw economics for businesses, I think it's important to like make business owners feel confident to start a business. Right? Hey, we'll come in and it doesn't need to be necessarily taxes or like tax breaks or like subsidies. It could be for the first year of running your business, there's a government accounting department that you can access, right? We have our own set of like trained accountants that you can come to and we'll run a small accounting department for you to make sure that you're doing everything right and up to code and it's all government. Now, granted, these are government workers, so they're salaried, so they work till their shift and then they're done. Um, but
Might
you
not
can
even
lean
be
on that
trained
for a
all the
little
way.
bit, right? You can lean on that for a little bit until you can get your own big enough accounting department, right? Some of the more difficult stuff when it comes to running a business, some of the more like maybe not costly stuff, but some of the stuff that's like a bit more difficult to get the wheels under you. We can help with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what? We'll give you a tax cut on a business loan, or we'll give you blah 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 on a this, but we expect, or we'll give you some sort of like government subsidized loan, but we expect, honestly, we should treat it like how the IMF treats third world countries. And that's not even really a joke, which is they figured out that if you just dump monies into communities, it sucks and it doesn't work. But if you dump loans into a community that you enforce the payment of, it actually benefits people hugely. Because one, it pre-selects for very responsible people. Two, it pre-selects for people with ideas they're willing to, they think are good enough to become an actual business. And then three, what you're doing and getting them to pay you back a loan is one, you're building credit, and two, you're helping teach these people like responsibility and stewardship of their business, so that you're building them into a successful business. Unironically, we should probably do the same thing as like state and federal governments here when it comes to building businesses. Instead of doing tax cuts and subsidies, hey, the government will give you a business loan, and it's at a slightly better rate because the taxpayer is footing the bill a little bit because the taxpayer likes to have competitive companies that offer them the best product, but we
Mm-hmm.
expect you pay it back.
Yeah,
Right?
that's
There
fair.
is a
Mm-hmm.
time schedule. There is a timetable. And guess what? If you fail to deliver, you're not up against the banks. You're up against the federal government. Good luck, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's an incentive. to do this thing because it's better to go through the government. Now, granted, if you do it with a bank, the banks might be able to offer more stuff, right? Theoretically, the government version would be very limited to like starting small businesses or mid-sized businesses. You probably don't want to be like, here's $1 billion, have at it, buddy. And there'd be more restrictions and regulations around what kind of business, like you can't do an LLC and then incorporate, take the loan, blah, blah, blah. Like you can't PPP yourself, right?
Yeah.
PPP yourself. That was kind of funny. But like you can't do that type of stuff. It has to be like a C corp or it has to be like a sole proprietorship. It can't be an LLC. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know if those are
Mm-hmm.
all mutually exclusive categories. I haven't taken a finance.
Oh no, no,
Leave me
no,
alone.
no. Those
Um,
are different. Yeah, I think
let's
like
go. All right.
when like LLC is like I only remember that because it's supposed to be like LLC is like so you said like sole proprietor and something else.
Mhm.
Both of those
C corp.
C
There's like
corp.
C corps and S corps.
Yeah. Well.
They're two separate
Oh,
kinds of
well now that's well I
incorporation.
mean I just remember that the solo one. If the business falls, that's on you. You will be paying it. But with
Hmm.
LLCs, I the goal was like if it's a large business and like it's a $400 million business and it tanks, the owner clearly doesn't have, especially now, $400 million to flip
Oh yeah.
that bill.
Yeah.
So it's not, you know what I mean? It's limited liability.
Hmm.
So it's he closes it, calls it a day, goes home, tries again.
Yeah. Yeah. The difference between I just Googled it according to Google AI, so grain of salt.
I'll take it.
C corps pay corporate taxes on profits, leading to potential double taxation when dividends are paid. So if you're a corporation, when you pay out a dividend, you will pay corporate taxes on the dividend, and you will pay personal taxes on like the recipient, like the recipients of the dividends will receive both have to pay both corporate taxes and individual taxes. S corps are pass-through entities avoiding corporate tax level. Pass-through entity profit losses passed on to personal tax returns, avoiding federal income tax. But they're restricted to 100 shareholders. There's one class of stock, so you can't have like two separate things. It's a much more limited kind of corporation versus C corp. So these are like your like family businesses that are
Yeah.
huge. Think like
Okay.
Costco.
Okay.
These
Okay.
non-public businesses or something like Steam would be. I think Steam might be an S corp because they don't have public, right? They haven't gone public. So S corps are ones that haven't gone public. They have very limited stock.
Okay. Okay.
Um, but C corps are your public corporations, and they can get double taxed. But it also opens you up to more kinds of investment because people can publicly buy into your company. You can issue more shares. You're in core. And by doing so, right? This sort of aligns with what I was saying earlier. By doing so, you're incurring more risk and more responsibility to the community, right?
Yeah.
But
I
you're
got you.
because what you get more risk, you get more responsibility because your potential for growth is much larger than an S corp. Um, but yeah, like I could totally see a world in which I think maybe this should happen, right? Who knows, maybe. But like the
Mm,
government coming and be like, listen, hey, you want to make an S or like you want to make a C, like you may be restricted to C corporations or sole proprietorships or S corps. I don't really care. Hey, you want to make this business? It can't be an LLC because you don't get to just take our money and run away. We will give you this money and we'll give you it at a much reduced interest, right? So we'll give you, $200,000, right? You put some sort of cap on it where it's like you can't extract a loan of over $1 million because we're trying to focus on small business or whatever the equivalent of $1 million would be in whatever
at that
current
time.
economy's money is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you can take out this much money. You will be at a reduced rate because the taxpayers are footing the bill because we all agreed as a society through voting that we want more corporations because we like and the current banking system isn't really affording for that. Or just because incompetent, right? It's the public option compared to the banks. With the banks will give you more money, but they also have more restrictions, right? The banks, or they have different kinds of restrictions. Right? Banks will give you a lot more money, but the banks also need to trust you a whole lot more than the government does, right? So
Yeah.
the government will come in to like someone who maybe isn't as trustworthy, or maybe trustworthy isn't like credit score type of deal, right? Some sort a new face, right? Someone who hasn't made a name for themselves wants to make a business. You incorporate through the government, right? We call it a G corp or something. It's a special kind of corporation, and you can offload a little bit, but the anticipation is in the next 5 years, you cannot turn your business into an S or a C corp or like a functioning sole proprietorship. The government just reclaims this stuff, and
Yeah.
now it's either run by the government or sold off to individual contractors. It's sold off, or like if the government can't find a use for it, it's sold off at auction to other companies, right? So let's say you bought a warehouse. Now the government controls the warehouse, and it'll be sold off at auction, or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, right?
Okay. Yeah, I got you. I got you.
Whatever resources you build in the process, like, and that way we give people this opportunity because this is unironically what they do with the IMF. Um, like I don't know, maybe implement that as like a purely like a U.S. based version of that to help build businesses. Um, to answer the question that you were asking me, which I don't remember what it was because I talked too much.
No, it's all good, all good.
Mm.
It was the worry about businesses becoming
Oh yeah,
too
people are
reliant
becoming
on government.
too reliant on the government.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a stewardship issue. I think there are ways to solve that through policy, putting deadlines on stuff. Um, So like, hey, if this isn't like shortening deadlines might be one of the ways to solve that, where it's like, hey, you the money is guaranteed, but we expect to do this. Paying for potentially either third party or investing as a government or a citizenry into high quality inspections, right? If you know that the government work you're going to be doing will have a like will basically be combed over multiple times by like inspectors who've already made their money, or you put out bounties. You build something, right? So you go, okay, you're going to build this bridge. And then you hire an inspector and you put bounties on the errors they can find. Now, granted, it's audited, right? We're not going to let people pass by, giving like sort of the broken windows thing where if you find like you just find an infinite number of faults, the company can dispute the faults, right? If you win the dispute, if you can prove that they lied about the particular thing, that money is taken like that money is taken from the person in double, right? So whatever you would have paid them, they now have to pay to you, I guess is the way I was trying to say that.
Okay.
So let's say, okay, $26,000, but then the corporation came in and disputed it. So we had a third party come in to settle the dispute and go, fair, not fair, 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 not. And so whatever you missed, you just don't get paid for, and the corporation isn't hit for, or you pay them, right? I don't know which one would be the more effective incentive, but whatever one worked better, what we would do. Um, so that way, you again, right? We're back to binary systems. So the government is paid to this person to do this work, and then you additionally factored into that cost of the project, right? So say it costs like $10 million to build a bridge. Let's say you've set aside $100,000 in bounty for a person to go through and like check all the stuff. Um, and then you probably want to keep the bounty secret. Um, the bounty is like an unknown factor in the official thing. I don't know if this is actually the best way to handle it, but corporations coming in. Hey man, if you want to give us a green check, we'll give you a job that pays X amount once you retire immediately. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like they do with like when they're building data centers. Skanky. Um, but with this, you get the binary system where you have both the independent investigation and the particular thing. And if you're a government, here's a really great way to do this: find a local person who does it, like a company. So you hire out a company that does these inspections, right? Or like just any like mechanic, right? Let's say, or any like civil engineer. You go to like a civil engineer firm. You pay one to build the bridge. You pay a construction company to build the bridge, and you pay another construction company or civil engineer firm to do the inspection. And now, if it's all factored into the cost of the budget,
Mm-hmm.
as a citizen, I would be willing to pay a little bit more to make sure that my bridges don't collapse. Because some contractor thought it was totally chill to just, do a half-ass job and move on with his life, a la like government housing. I want, if the government's
Fair.
gonna do stuff, I want it to be like cool stuff or like good stuff at the very least, right?
Yeah.
What happened to our big public works? But like I want it to be good. I want the bridge to be good, and I don't want it to like fall apart in 2 years. So I would be willing to pay some other company as a taxpayer, which cost me a nominal additional amount, or no amount at all because it's part of the city's budget um, that I've already paid into to build a bridge that's high quality. So I think instituting stuff like that is how you get around. Is again, we're back to like sort of like incentives.
Yeah.
Responding
Mm-hmm.
people, we're doing sort of a dual carrot stick thing where whenever one piggy gets giving one piggy the carrot gives the other a stick. So now they're stuck both moving very. Now we're on two pigs moving very fast, which is
Mm-hmm.
better than one pig not moving fast at all.
Okay. Yeah. I got you. I got you. Well, this was great input. I love picking your brain. Uh, if you
Well,
made it this
thank you.
far into the episode, thank you. It's a long one. It's like
This
an
is all
hour and
Patreon exclusive.
all of it. All
No one
right.
gets to see this.
Well, thank you for joining us. Bye.